Welcome to Assumptions, the podcast where two friends, one an atheist, that's me, Kyle, and one a Christian.
Hi, my name is Daniel, and I'm a Christian.
Sit down and listen to each other's worldview. Today, this is kind of like a part 2 conversation that we started last time about friendship, about singleness, and this one we're going to continue that kind of topic, but kind of broaden that out into community.
Yeah, we were trying to split these up into individual episodes, and they all intersect. It's all just one big mess.
I fall down to my knees. Eyes are raised to the sky.
Barry Danilik.
Now that is a very different sort of ideals of blessing in the New Testament, none of which require marriage or sex. They are part of a spiritual covenant relationship. And so we have eternal connection. We have a spiritual family. It's not a physical family anymore. It's brothers and sisters in Christ. And we have, of course, also that connection with God the Father himself for all eternity. And as I said earlier, I think that that's ultimately the consummation of this idea of what sex is meant to be, pointing us to.
Lish Veldhuizen.
I understand your question. I don't have a constant community other than my family, and I think my friends from high school and that friendship that we'll always have. And I wouldn't even say that was a community. So this is probably the first time I've considered this question. So I apologize if I'm going to just.
That's okay.
These are virgin thoughts. No, I think my community does change because I change and my interests change, and physically where I'm at it changes. So how I show up in that community is similar to my sense of home.
Nick Taniguchi.
I find community through YouTube, or I found community through YouTube. Who knows where I'll find it next, but I just so happen to be in this really nice pocket of good, talented, sweet YouTube people who weave in and out of my life and just form an amazing community.
Rabbi Seth Goldstein.
To be part of this minyan or a prayer community or a spiritual community, nobody has to be partnered or married. Individuals have the same standing or status as anybody else, regardless of marital status or partner status. I think what is interesting, though, and this is a challenge that I think we do, not because of any spiritual teaching or whatnot, but I mean, there is an emphasis, well, scratch that. I think that there is also at the same time an emphasis on this idea of passing down the faith, passing down traditions from generation to generation, and therefore putting an emphasis on family, on children, and I think for good practical reasons, right? That's how it's going to continue. But I think that sometimes we end up in congregational life almost putting too much emphasis on that at the expense of people who are not. And that
Last time, Kyle, we were talking about friendship and just how the sadness of having friends
All my
ends.
friends are sad.
All my friends are sad. And you brought up a good point that the limitations of friendship, like part of it is just you can only have a certain number of friends.
Yeah.
And so I think, and it is
As much as Facebook says I can have up to 1,000, it's not really true.
Is there a limit?
I think there was at one time. I don't know if there still is.
Interesting. But yeah, you're right. Like we are, and I think that's one of the things that as friendships have not come and gone, but there have been friendships that have had moments of intensity that have then faded into just, you see them now and again. That's just been, for me, it's been two things that have been a comfort in that. One is this, what I believe is that in the end, that those friendships will continue, especially if they're Christian friends. Like I will have them for all eternity.
Non-Christian friends don't care.
They don't. They just, I will not have. But the other is just the sense of, this is this is part of being human, and I have other friends that are replacing them, other people in my life that are filling those.
You don't necessarily have to name names here,
Yeah.
but are there any like super close friends you've had in the past that you have lost touch with that you wish you had not?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so there are friends. Well, okay, let me go back to where I left off. I'll answer that question in a roundabout way by going back to where I left off with those three friends.
Right.
That
We
night
just found
of
out
sorrow.
that there was light, and then continue on.
But there was that night of sorrow where I realized that the friends don't continue indefinitely.
Chapter 4 in your autobiography.
That's right, the night of sorrow.
The night of sorrow.
And then there's also the night of joy, and they clashed.
Yes, right.
You should see his armor. But both those three friends at the time, one of them continued to be friends for a good while. And the other one I had lost for a long time. And then just last year, he reached out to me on Instagram. I was like, hey, let's go just grab some beers and a supper. We went out. And it just connected on a much deeper level than I think we ever even had. It was such a good conversation. And then he moved to Vancouver like the next week.
Oh, wow,
it was just,
okay.
but it was this nice little sense of, oh, wow, that person that I had totally thought I'd lost as a friend for 5 years.
At least nice little bookend to that, at least.
Oh yeah, and there was a sense of, oh, this person, I'm not going to necessarily see this person every day for the next year or every week for the next year, but this could happen again. I could have a one evening of just rich deepness.
Well, there's kind of like a recurring joke that a lot of people have been talking about recently that I've seen online, which is adulthood is essentially having friends and saying, hey, we should meet each other, and then not talking for 8 months. And then finally seeing each other, and it's kind of okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's not something you have to have on a daily basis.
No, absolutely not. But I think and I guess it's, to pause the narrative and go back to your question, there are seasons where I have a friendship that I do meet with every other week.
Right.
And we try to, and it's a really regular, it's a really nurturing. And what I've noticed is that, those people eventually drop off. And it's because they move or our social environments change. And I still might want to do exactly what you just described, connect with them one-off, and it could be really great, if once a year kind of thing. And they're still an influence in my life. But just being aware of that, but still being intentional to have people in my life that I do connect with regularly, that know me well enough and I'm comfortable well enough with to unload in the way that you talked about last, and just have that honesty and have that real sense of comfort that comes from that. So I guess that's what I'm saying is that there's seasons where you have rich friendships, and it's okay because we're a very transient society and people will move, and that's to be expected, but I've always tried to have friends that replace those, and that sounds kind of sad.
My backup friends.
Friends. Well, just there's new stages, and those friends come in, and so going back to the narrative, then the third friend who I thought was gone forever, he still is my best friend, and he has moved multiple times and has been in my city. He's returned to that city, then he's moved to other ones, back and forth, and we just come to the realization that we're going to be lifelong friends. And right now, because he's moved to a different city, we don't connect as much as we have, but there still is this real deep sense of friendship that comes from that. And I guess I was thinking about the kind of friends that I have, and I've divided them to 3 categories. It sounds really utilitarian, but I think when I look, there are 3 kind of categories of friendships, and I'm going to put...
There's the pupa stage, the larval stage.
We'll have a chart on our website.
That's right.
And this is not just including like romantic friendship, which we talked a little bit about before. But 3 friendships. So there are the peers, the Christian peers, that are people that are my generation. And
do you put that modifier Christian peers there specifically, or do you have peers that are not Christian?
I have peers that are not Christian too, and we'll get to them.
Sure. That's the 4th level of friend.
Yeah. But so Christian peers and Christian friendship, there's something very much that I think is different about friends of mine that aren't Christians, because as you identified, there's this sense of we're driving each other to Christ. And there's a reality that we tasted and we know of, that will orient our discussions and will orient the nature of our friendship in a different way than it can exist outside of that. It's not to say that Christian friends that aren't Christians are important. I'll get to that, but that's I think why. And so those peers, those people that are my age or within the same decade, that are just really good friends, and I'm able to share a lot of joy with, share a lot of common interests with. but also have that rich fellowship that comes from encouraging each other in Christ. And then there are the older Christian friends, people that are not my generation but older than me, that are have gone through more life, that are in a different stage of life when it comes to career and when it comes to family. I've had some of these that have actually divorced and are single now and just have a lot of life wisdom to say, some that are married and have kids. And I've just found people that are older than me that can speak into my life in ways that I don't know yet. It's been so helpful. But there is a sense that they are still friends. They are a friend rather than more mentor type situation, even though they act as a mentor to me. So that's the third. And then the third category are people that aren't Christians. And I've quoted Alan Jacobs' book, How to Think, quite a bit on the podcast because I think it aligns with us quite well. But he has this phrase, I may have said this before, where he says, try to find people that are not necessarily like-minded, but like-hearted. And so people that share, it's hard to define that, but don't have the same beliefs and don't have the same worldview, but have the same spirit and the same ethos. And that's someone like you would be like that. And there are others I've had in various stages. And
I'm level 3.
You're level 3, yeah. but those are the people that I think it's just so helpful to people that think differently than I do and think outside my worldview and can challenge that, but I can still align with and have that deep sense of yes with. And I have those at school. I've had those at work. I've had some of those that I know I'll continue to be friends with for life as we come and go. That Lish, who we're going to interview in this podcast, she's out on the West Coast now, but every time I go out there, I try to connect with her, and we just have long, deep conversations from very different worldviews, but are feel so encouraging because of that deep alignment. So those are the 3 categories of friends. Do any of those connect with you, or do any of those align with you?
Well, I mean, somewhat. I think I would have very different divisions between there. I have like the close friends that I have that I'm speaking with at least a bare minimum on a weekly basis. I think I have the friends that I speak to on like maybe a yearly basis where we check in on each other from time to time, but maybe you're not in each other's lives constantly. And then of course there's just the friendly people who like the Facebook friends, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's like I know what's going on and we know what's going on with each other, but are we super close? No, not really, but we know of each other. We are aware of each other.
Yeah. How is it for you being bisexual? Does that threaten friendship?
In what way?
Well, in the sense that I think one of the things I've heard expressed before, and whether I agree with this or not is a different question, but that before homosexuality was normalized, but even before then, even when it was just a thing that people knew could happen, that kind of threatens the deep connections, the deep sense of transparency. Because what if? And as someone who identifies as bisexual, then has that ever come up? Is that something that has ever
100%? The person who is the hardest in those relationships is myself. And I fully recognize that. There has been no time in my life where a friend of mine, any close friend of mine who I've confided that to, has tried to push me away or tried to exclude me from their life. I have tried to do that for myself because I for whatever reason, I feel like I need to in a certain case. But no, I don't feel like I've ever felt that way. What I do want to bring up in that case is I think we should really discuss this article that Wesley Hill wrote. That's $20 again for him because we mentioned him.
At least you're mentioning him, not me this time. You're bringing him up.
So this article that he wrote, was it a blog post?
No, it was actually an article from a magazine.
An article. Okay. It's called Love Again, on a Celibate Breakup and What Happened After. Now, I don't know if you've highlighted any specific points here, Daniel.
There's some stuff I want to talk about, more about the community aspect at the end. But I think you're talking more about the deep friendship. And,
I mean, so the very basic overview.
And we'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, read the article, absolutely.
What did you think of it? Just as
I liked it quite a bit, and I identified with it, which is why I want to bring it up. So in there, the main story he talks about at the beginning, which he then uses for a really good teachable moment at the
moments
for the basis of the article. But what he starts off with was really good friends with this guy. Realized or thought that this was just a platonic relationship, kind of realized he wanted it to be more than what the other guy did, and then they eventually Wesley wanted it to be more than just a friendship when the other guy did not, and then they eventually split that friendship off and they don't talk with each other anymore. I identify with a lot of that story in that, to reveal some more information about me, this basically happened to me in university. Not to the extent where we're no longer friends. We're actually able to kind of work past it. But there was this feeling with a good friend of mine, and I wasn't really even conscious of it until it was too late. But I found myself getting really jealous over any time that he would have a girlfriend. And I couldn't even understand why until I kind of unpacked it for myself. I'm like, oh, this is snuck up on me.
Yeah.
Usually it's very easy for me to be like, oh, I'm sexually attracted to this person, or I want to be romantically involved with this person. And because our relationship had started off with just being a friendship, and we had grown so close to each other, I felt like, why am I feeling so antagonistic towards these partners? And it was kind of a wedge that was there between us that we couldn't get past there. And eventually it was just me being able to accept the fact, hey, like, this is never going to happen.
Right.
And this is actually something that's actually kind of a problem within the gay community, or sometimes even the bisexual community, which is falling in love, or at least falling in lust with straight people.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? Because it is a one-sided relationship that's never going to work.
Yeah.
As much as you want it to, it's never going to work. So you have to be very honest with yourself if you ever find yourself in that situation. So I loved how Wesley wrote this was the fact that, you feel so involved. Like, you feel like there is this deep connection that you feel like there should be something
special.
more.
You want to protect the specialness of it.
And you want to protect this relationship, but it's a relationship that doesn't really exist. The friendship is true, but the meaning that you're providing to a lot of stuff is not really there.
Right. It's kind of like when you have a crush on someone who's a friend. Like, I've had that happen, not in a straight side of things, but in and you're like, you're enjoying it so much because you think of where it could go, not necessarily what it is. And it's
thinking for the future, not thinking about the present.
Exactly. And you're reading so much depth into it. Like, wasn't that a wonderful evening because of where it could lead to, and why I like this person so much, rather than it was a good friendship. It's funny because with Annie and I, when we started being friends, like a deep friends, I remember telling myself, like, don't let this happen. Don't let your only value for this friendship be the possibility of it turning into something that's worth it. There's a sense of investment. I'm investing so much time and so much energy to this person, and to have it lost later on would just like, and I think I was quite conscious, like, maybe I'm just here to keep her from, she just moved to a new city. Maybe I'm here to keep her from being lonely, and that's it. And I want to be okay with just enjoying this friendship. And it, of course, did lead to something, but we were still quite conscious of that and trying to keep it a friendship.
It's something I struggle with quite a bit, because I really, really have to check myself a lot of the time, because someone new starts at work, or I meet someone for the first time, and maybe I really enjoy their company, and I have to be really honest with myself. It's like, do I want to continue talking with this person, or being friends with this person, or starting like even just a business relationship with this person because I'm attracted to them, or because I just like their company?
Right.
And sometimes it's a really hard thing to answer for me, where it's like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm pursuing this because I find them attractive, not because I think this is actually a good friendship or something like that.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, going back to where I was talking about my relationship with Annie, I think it was something that was kind of nice for us, is we didn't really have, at least I didn't really have that attraction initially. So I could really say, yes, I want this person as a friend because I think they're a really cool person and I really value them. And then out of that came attraction, and just, it was wonderful to have that. That's very rare. I think because it wasn't physical, it was through texting that it formed, that was able to happen. And that doesn't, of course, happen for everybody, and that's okay.
Are you friends with somebody anymore that you started the friendship thinking that it could lead to a
Not
romantic
really,
relationship?
no, they don't.
I can't think of any good, I can't think of any like strong friendships I have.
That makes sense.
That's where it started from.
That makes sense in a way. Like, but I think the thing, so you were identifying with, you talked about how that is a common element for you as someone who does identify as bisexual. For me, I think as someone who's not bisexual or gay, that it's almost become a block. The worry of how it could be perceived kind of comes across as cooling down the relationship in ways that it might not without that threat. Do you know what I mean? The sense that I really want to get to know this person better. I want to be affectionate towards this person in ways that are fine, and I want to invest deeply and express my friendship affection for this person. But if I do, will it come across as if one of us is gay? And that sexual element might enter into it. And so then you kind of just take a step back, and that actually hurts the friendship, because if there wasn't the threat of that, I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? And that, I think it happened man, woman, But that makes sense. But to have that happen guy to guy is something that's just like.
So have you pulled back on relationships because
I felt people pull it.
Okay.
I felt people do that towards me.
Yeah.
Or just the natural. Like that I think there is an element of platonic affection and platonic transparency and emotion that most people, because of our sexualization of our culture, associate with romantic.
Sure.
And the fact that doesn't have to be romantic in a friendship, but because it can be perceived as soon as it becomes romantic.
Isn't that not the other people's problem? This is my
Sure.
position where I'm coming from. Is like I understand from the outside perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe this could be going on.
Yeah.
But if that isn't what's going on,
I think this is just such a fear of it.
Yeah.
So there's a fear of it within the church, there's a fear of it within the culture, perception, maybe within the other person, within yourself. And so it just means you're not able to go as deep. You know, because you watch like Frodo and Sam, right? Like, but how many good movies or stories? I mean, look at the story of David and Jonathan in the Bible. They had a covenant friendship. Wesley Hill wrote a book about covenant friendships. But what's everybody saying? Oh, they were gay. Jonathan and David were gay. Frodo and Sam were gay. Like, no, it's just that there's this. But so then you're not able to let that goodness of that kind of friendship exist because of the threat of.
I see.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, for me, it's such a non-issue anymore that I wouldn't care if that's what they thought, because that's not what's going on.
Yeah.
This actually ties into a lot of fan fiction, weirdly enough, and we don't need to go down that whole road, but fan fiction really in its modern day started with people writing stories about Star Trek, thinking that Captain Kirk and Spock should be together. So I think this is just a fascinating thing that people always want, like the stuff that they're watching, reading, consuming. It was like, but what if they were dating?
Yeah.
and instead of just letting it be like friendship.
Yeah,
that's
and the beauty,
there.
I mean, the beauty of Harry Potter's, I think Harry Potter does this a bit too much. Hermione and what's the redhead's name?
Ron.
They have to be a couple, and she like has to make that happen.
Right.
And I think that's almost a shame because then
that was foreshadowed in book 1. Of course, it was going to happen.
But have you ever read Wind in the Willows?
I don't think I've ever read it. I've watched the cartoon, the Disney cartoon.
It's the Wind in the Willows book. It's one of the more beautifully written books. I read it again last year.
Oh, nice.
It is. Go pick it up. It's wonderful. But
Badger and Mr. Toad.
And Lewis. I don't know where this is, but I have to look it up. But Lewis talked about how those
C.S. Lewis. I'm
C.S.
guessing.
Lewis,
Okay.
yeah. How those friends. So there's Toad, always causing trouble.
Yeah.
There's Otter, the poet. There's Mole, just this chipper, excited guy. And then there's Badger, this like grumpy kind of custodian, this older character. And how that friendship, they're each unique and they're each very different, but because they come together in friendship, the community, they represent the heart of Englishness. Like this is all an aspect of being English and that English character, but if you can't have them apart, they have to come together, and just the importance of the friendship.
Yeah,
coming together.
It's interesting because I mean we've talked about this before about how I tend to love television shows specifically that are about like an extended family,
Buddy
almost
group,
like they're a bunch of friends, but they're an extended family. Joss Whedon was really great at this because Buffy and Firefly are two of my favorite shows of all time. And yes, there's some characters in there that are dating each other, but really it's just a bunch of disparate people. They're kind of thrust together, and they're making this really cool community work.
I mean, Lord of the Rings.
And Lord of the Rings works too.
People that hate each other as race that come together because of a common cause, and that common cause is necessary to make that friendship.
For sure.
And I think that's maybe like a picture. You can, just as you can romanticize things, you can spiritualize things. Kyle, I don't know if you knew this, but you can say like that's a picture of the church. These people that don't like each other. Like, I mean, it's tricky because a lot of my friends that are Christians, I have a lot in common with them. I think I would be friends with them even if they weren't Christians. But when it comes to church and showing up at church, most of the people I'm sitting next to and I get to know and I'll still spend time with outside in the week, I would never spend time with these people. I don't like them. It's like, it's like it's like Legolas and Gimli. Like, why would you ever hang out with each other unless it's to save the world from destruction, right? Like, that's the only thing that drives your friendship. But there's something, just that the supernatural element. There's something else going on. There's a greater cause, and it is Christ, and that unites these people that otherwise wouldn't. And sadly, that doesn't happen enough.
Yeah. I will say this. I will be cold and dead in the ground before I ever spend time with that golden-haired elf. I'm just saying.
Legolas.
So you wanted to bring up some other things from the Wesley Hill
article. Yeah. So the aspect that really encouraged me and challenged me was the second half of the article, where he talks about how he is very intentional as a single celibate gay. He cannot have, that relationship, the one-on-one relationship, he said, wasn't able to work out as much as he wanted it to. And I think he talks a little bit, I'll have to reread it, but about how it's even hard for other friends that he wants to, like even gay friends, just to develop those good friendships. But he does have very intentional and very rich friendships with couples and with families specifically that have kids. He describes how he'll go over once a week. I think he says there's 5 people in his life, 5 couples in his life that have asked him to be the godparent of one of their kids. And they've done this because he has spent so much time with this family. And he says he'll go to their house once a week. They will cook him a meal. He'll wash the dishes and clean the kitchen while they put the kids to bed.
Right.
And then they'll come down and they'll spend the evening sharing, watching a movie, making dessert, drinking wine, but also just being a heart to heart.
This is very familiar to me because, I mean, that's kind of how we started our friendship.
With
Justin
story.
and stuff like that, right?
Story.
Like he putting the kids to bed, and then we came down, either watched a movie or did something else.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and that common life, the fact that he brought us into his home and into the disobeying kids and all the chaos and the imperfections and kids running down in pajamas during the middle of our R-rated movie, all the awkwardness of it. But that's where friendship can exist, and the reason that there's a lot in that to unpack. I will say though that one of the friendships I have right now, one of the older couples in my life, they're probably 10 years older than me, 10, 15. But they live fairly close, like about an hour's walk from my school. And so we've just said every other week, I'm coming over. And they've asked me to do this. They could just come over every other week. We want it to be a habit. And same thing, I arrive, they've just kind of finished supper. They save some food for me because I get there a little bit late. I talk for a little bit. Then I usually read with the kids, read them a story. Sometimes I've done it, like they had the bath, the kids, and are in their pajamas, and I'll go upstairs and then sit on their bed with them and read a bedtime story. We'll pray together, and the kids will pray and I'll pray. And these are 5-year-old girls, right? And then they're put to bed, and then I'm downstairs, and either it'll be me and Jason, and we'll just we'll have long, deep discussions, or we'll watch a movie, or we'll jam, and he'll show me the songs he's working on. But quite often it's been Tanessa and Jason, and the 3 of us. And I treasure that so much because I think I need people in my life that are from different stages in life, and I need females in my life, and I need married people in my life, and people with kids, because this, especially right now with Annie, like I'm thinking through all these questions, and I want people to give me their perspectives on it. And it's just been such a sweet, wonderful thing to have, and I'm so glad for it. I just cherish that time. And it's the thing is too though about it that it takes work, and it's always like like, oh man, I'm so tired today. I do not want to go over to their place. I'm an introvert. I need some time. And I go and I'm refreshed. And I'm a little bit tired the next day, but it's worth it. But it's hard. And we're still like, even Annie, my girlfriend's coming out to visit us in the summer, and we're going to their place. They have a place out in Kelowna, and we're going to spend 3 or 4 days with them. And same kind of thing, I guess, in their family, and just how good that will be for Annie and I to have that community aspect.
Hi everyone, yes, this is Kyle breaking into the conversation again. As always, Assumptions is brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. If you haven't gone to the Alberta Podcast Network's website, there are so many great shows to listen to. Shows like Epic Podcast, A Branded World, Press Start to Join, Not There Yet, or because the World Cup is currently raging, the Young Gaffers, Jason and Adam, bring you their refreshing, ridiculous, and uniquely Canadian perspective on the soccer world. And I can say this, even as a person who isn't the most sports fanatical, I still enjoy listening to Adam and Jason talk about the beautiful game of soccer. So check out all the great shows by going to albertapodcastnetwork.com. Secondly, we are helped by the ATB. Specifically this week, I'm going to talk to you about No Fee All In. This is a brand new type of bank account. ATB has a new digital bank account. The best part, there are basically no fees as long as you're doing most of your banking digitally. And if you're like me, that's basically all that I do. I very rarely even cross that threshold of an actual physical building, mostly because I'm lazy. But you can also earn higher interest on higher balances. That's right. If you have money in the bank, you can earn more money. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to atb.com/listen. Lastly, I've been mentioning this the last few weeks, but if you have a smartphone, you should download the free CKUA app. That's a radio station here in Alberta, but all of the shows that are on the Alberta Podcast Network can be listened to through that app, assumptions included. Whether you use Android or iOS, you can easily listen to all the shows on the CKUA app. Thanks everyone for listening. Next episode, we will begin hearing more of the interviews we conducted as research for this season. Can't wait for you all to begin hearing them. But for now, let's get back to the conversation. Something that I want to pick out from what you just said is I think it is important to have friends that are of different sexes and different backgrounds and different stages of their lives, just because, again, you get those different inputs and different perspectives on different things. Not to get political here or anything, but I mean, there's the famous Mike Pence rule, right? About men should never be alone with another woman who isn't your wife.
Yeah.
And I have quite a few different friends that are women, and I really value their input and value their perspectives on different things.
Totally, same.
To make this like all wrap up into a nice little bow from some of the other stuff we've been discussing here, though, what you were mentioning before about this misinterpretation of maybe a platonic friendship between two men.
Yeah.
This sometimes happens between me and my friend Jen.
Right.
So I remember very clearly when we went to VidCon one year, it's like, "Oh, Mrs. Marshall, how's it going?" As she like walked up to the counter, and I'm like, "No," and I don't want to be like jump in there like, "That's preposterous. How could you ever think that?" But at the same time, it's like, well, that's not really what's going on.
Yeah.
We are friends, and I want it to remain a friendship throughout my life. So it's interesting that people immediately have to go there.
Reading that account of Wesley and his friends, and hearing just my story with my friends I just described, what's your reaction to that? Is it something that you have in your life? Is it something that exists?
No,
I mean, have that?
not at the same one. And again, this is why I value like when you invite me out to your house or something like that, because I get to have that perspective and that conversation, say like with your parents who are like of a different generation and are not my own parents. Although I completely feel judged every time I come because it's like, I say something that I shouldn't have said. Anyways, that's my own insecurities.
And my parents. Let's be honest.
But I like being able to go and have different types of friendships for different reasons.
Yeah.
Honestly, for the last few months, I've been so tunnel visioned on owning my own business that a lot of that stuff has fallen away more so than I would have liked. But I like the fact that, for instance, I have a lot of Christian friends, and I have a lot of friends that have different backgrounds and can speak different languages, and there's all these different perspectives. And I actually really like having friends in different cities around the world.
Totally, yeah.
Because that means, hey, I can visit Seattle, and I have an excuse to do that. Or I have an excuse to go to oh my gosh, Louisville, if I ever wanted to, which I don't. But if I did want to go to Louisville, I could.
They have a great food scene, I'm told.
That's right. The only pushback I would give maybe to the Wesley Hill article, and I don't know if it was his intention, but I felt like there was this subtext that gay people will always feel alone and they're always going to be miserable in their lives. Right. And I just feel like that's just not the case, and definitely not the examples I've seen with a bunch of friends that I have. Definitely that can be the end result for many people, but I don't think that is the ultimate result for every gay person.
No. Yeah, I think what he's identifying it is in the Christian community. Unlike the so he's saying that in the Christian community there's a tendency where if you don't have a biological family, that's the only way to fulfill God's blessing. And as we've seen in the Bible, that's not the case. That's actually, it could be argued, this is a bit risky, I think marriage is very key in the Bible. I've used the analogy of how the wedding feast of the Lamb is an important analogy that's used. But I have heard arguments, and I'll link to one of the show notes that talks about how actually friendship is, in a sense, more important. The spiritual friendship, this deep friendship that exists because of what Christ has done amongst us, and that will supersede even marriage in eternity as the relationship that exists. And so I guess when I look at an article like Wesley's here, and just hearing I want to highlight just the amount of intentionality and the work that he's put into maintaining this. Living with another family as a single guy has got to be hard, especially with crying babies
Mhm.
and messy diapers,
Yeah.
and your own privacy. That takes work, and you have to break down a wall that is so hard to overcome, and our society doesn't encourage it. And I don't think our hearts, I mean, I use that phrase, our hearts. I don't think our hearts encourage it, because we would much rather not inconvenience people. We would much rather not inconvenience ourselves. And isn't it just easier just to pull up, just crash on the couch instead of go out and visit people? And not to say you can't have your own time, but that he's making these habits that cut into his own sense of identity and his own sense of time.
Right.
But the effect is that he is much more grounded as a person. And that's kind of what I want to think about in terms of this loneliness. Like, is there, as a Christian, there is a culture, a spiritual reality to the friendships I can have with other people that will still make life as a single person hard, but will help that loneliness. And there is a deep comfort and a deep joy that I've experienced that comes from that. But it's going to take pushing against society and our isolation tendencies and our own tendencies as humans to want to do that.
I am going to make a bold prediction and say that actually might be what the future holds.
Yeah.
I think that for like the young kids, I'm thinking like my nephew who's 4 years old, and my niece who was just born, is as much as technology is going to be a part of their lives, you can already see like early teenagers like really moving away from social media and online all the time and really looking at analog stuff a lot more.
Yep.
But what I mean is I think that if they're more concerned about in real life relationships rather than using their technology as a distraction device, then I could foresee maybe in the next 30 years we kind of have this pendulum swift back to valuing those types of relationships more than the individuality that is currently on display.
I hope so. I'll link to another article in the comments that was a headline in the Atlantic magazine
The
a couple
Atlantic?
years ago. Yeah, I know. But
Your brother's favorite magazine. That's an inside joke.
They had this wonderful article that I refer to in conversation with people more than any other article, I think, called "The Future of Work," that was looking at if there's less jobs, stable, if driving trucks, which is the number one employment of males in the United States, won't exist in 50 years because it's all going to be automated. How will those kind of things influence society, the shift down to work? And he talked a lot about not only the analog and the importance of doing stuff with your hands and kind of the return to that, but also if people aren't traveling for jobs as much, can we have smaller cities that are more community focused, and will that change things? And part of me is like, I hope that'll happen, and I'm encouraged by that. Part of me goes, it's not just Facebook, and all these things, it's also us that do this.
Yeah, for sure.
And it does take a selflessness to break away from that. And I think I want to talk a little bit about the Christian culture. This is my own, not yours, Kyle, but I was at a wedding recently, and it was a great wedding, and it was a Christian wedding, and there was a lot of great analogies made between. I've talked about like the Christian reality of marriage, but it felt like just so romanticizing marriage in a way and glorifying it. And I was like, it would be very hard to be single. As someone who wants to get married and is in a relationship, it was fine to attend, but it's so easy to adopt that romancing of romance in the church too, and not say that yes, it's wonderful and we encourage it and there's great benefits to it, but it is not the reality that it was in older traditional societies. As Christians, we don't have to. It's changed, and I think of stories like Joy Beth, which interview we just heard on a recent episode, and just her frustrations as being a single and feeling useless in the church, feel like something's broken with her because she's single. And I think I have a family member, very dear family member, who's in her 50s and is single and has wanted to get married, and just the pain of that, it's hard. And not just to say that that's because of the church's fault. I think a lot of it that makes it way harder, the church culture, but it's just hard in general. When you want to have someone, it's hard. But these kinds of habits that Wesley talks about, and if that would be expressed more in the church and encouraged more and validated in ways that are biblical and ways that speak to that reality. I think everyone is encouraged by it, and I think it makes the pain of loneliness much easier, and you can taste the joy that comes from Christian fellowship in ways that right now it's just very hard. So I think Wesley's approach in that article is just really encouraging for that, and I really am thankful for people in my life, like the couple I mentioned, that are willing to open up their homes.
I would definitely be encouraged by that. I mean, part of the issue with Christianity today is that there does seem to be a disconnect, I think, between the innate teachings and the way that most churches are presented in popular culture currently. And I'm here as the resident atheist of this podcast, having a bunch of Christian friends who I believe do uphold the principles of Christianity in a really inspiring way. And yet, and this could be a problem with media and would be a broader conversation with that, but within most times when I see Christianity represented, it's usually a hate-filled message rather than a love-filled message. I don't know if there's a way to counteract that, but if that is how they led,
right? What Wesley just described here
was what Wesley just said. It's like we value community. We think that people should branch out and have these different types of relationships, that singleness is okay. Like that was what their message was. Still adhering to their tenets, yes, of course. Like there's things that they just do not agree with. But if that was what their message was, I think that would go a long way.
I think in that Wesley article, you kind of get both. Like you were talking about how, you haven't mentioned this, but it's easy to read that article as someone who looks at it from a cultural standpoint and say, what a narrow-minded view. Like, can't you just, like, you're so lonely, mister, why can't you just go off and satisfy your desires? And what he's saying is that if I were to do that, would I have see that beauty that you just described that should be put on display? So I think that's where, like, we need both. We need, and I've talked about this before, of frustrations of church culture that needs to display more of the beauty of that. Like, but you can't display that beauty without the rules, without the requirements that fall into that, which you mentioned. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we can agree on that. One of the things that, just tying this back to the dating side of things and coming back to singleness, the sense that marriage, and we talked about this before when it comes to dating, like how maybe it's just an age thing because I'm younger. But I was very content in my singleness, and Annie was too, my girlfriend. And because we were content in our singleness, saying that, okay, God has placed us in this for a reason. It's good, and we can serve our communities, and that's good. And I remember Annie telling me, like, yeah, I wasn't looking for a relationship because I had a church that I could be part of, and I'm a teacher at a Christian school. That's my community. I want to pour into them. But now that we're dating, it's been such a relief to know that about her and about ourselves. We're not coming into this relationship because we need each other. And just the clinginess of that, there's a sense of, no, we chose to do this because we clearly see God wanting it for us. And we were okay before. We were okay serving God. So it just gives a sense of peace to the relationship and a sense of trust that I think is really nice. And then the other thing, just from a relationship standpoint, it's harder for us because we live in two different communities to have as much community input as we would like. But it's something that we are very conscious of when we were trying to decide whether to pursue dating. The first people I talked to was that couple I just described. I went to their place, same kind of thing, went down the basement and told them everything and got their input, and got input from other Christians of different ages and my own family, of course, but she did the same thing on her end. So that, and then as we were coming together as a couple, whenever I visit, I met with her pastor just for beers, just to talk, like not a checkup, just wanting to talk and get to know them better. And we've done music at her church together as a couple, and we've gone to her 83-year-old friend's house, and we've gone to friends of mine in Portland I didn't know that well, but they invited us in. They invited another couple in, and then a single person in, and we just had a wonderful feast at their table that we barely knew these people. And then we've had brunches at her place where we bring in other couples in, and her roommate, and so there is a sense of community in that relationship already, which I think has just been so helpful for us because we see more of each other that way and more aspects of the other person, and it really sets the relationship to welcome the other in, which is what I hope we can do.
Must be nice. You know, you often have a lot of quotes on hand from your spiritual teachings, like from the Bible and that sort of thing.
And Wesley Hill.
And all these other great thinkers. Most of my spiritual teachings are from the composer Stephen Sondheim. And so,
So he was like a classical, like a great composer, right?
he
did musical theater.
He does musical theater, which I think, yes, he is one of the all-time greats as far as lyricists and musicians in that regard. I will tell you this right now: I am working on a podcast devoted to his work, so keep on the lookout for that if you're into musical theater and Stephen Sondheim in particular. But there.
Sorry, what? Keep going.
In particular, I was reminded of this show called Merrily We Roll Along, which famously flopped on Broadway, but has since become one of these huge cult classics.
Okay.
Afterwards. Anyways, it's actually a story told in reverse. You actually start in the last scene and you end in the first scene in the musical.
Oh, fun.
And it's about this guy called Franklin Shepherd who has a couple of friends around him and how they all started as friends. And then slowly got disillusioned with each other as they go along. He really only becomes focused on money, and his friends can see that that's maybe not the best reason. Anyways, there's this scene that happens where one of his friends recognizes that they're not as close as what they once were.
Yeah.
And he breaks down and says, a friendship's like a garden. You have to water it and tend it and care about it.
Does he sing this or does he say this?
Well, interestingly enough, this is like the one point in the song when he states this. So
Okay,
the song
gotcha,
ends
okay.
and he states this, and then the song starts up again. But so yeah, a friendship's like a garden. You have to water it and tend it and care about it. And you know what? I want it back. That's what he says. And this is, I feel like this kind of encapsulates
Yeah,
a little bit of some
totally.
stuff that we've been talking about here.
Yeah.
He also does sing on later that friendship's something you don't really lose, is the lyric that he sings. So I want to talk about both of those here just briefly.
Yeah.
So the first part about friendship being a garden, we have kind of talked around this, but I think it is true. It's not something that just always remains intact. You do have to keep coming back to it
Yes.
and keep
Intentionality.
working on it. There's intentionality. And I think it does have to come from both people at the
Yes.
same time.
Yeah.
It cannot be a one-sided
Yeah,
thing.
and something that Tim Keller points. I just reread his book on marriage, but he points out that there has to be a common. I think he quotes C.S. Lewis again that love is two people staring into each other's eyes. Friendship is two people staring at a goal together, staring at something else, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. And I'll put in the show notes some further quotes on that he pulls out. But the sense that there has to be a common interest to keep that friendship alive, a common focus. I think that's what for Christian friendship, that's where Christ comes in.
Right.
But go on.
Well, what I think is important about that is that friendship, in order to flourish, is not something that it's not like a chia pet or something where you set it and forget it. You do need to make the hard work. As someone who knows how hard it is to garden, my parents maintain a garden every summer,
Yeah,
and
same.
it's this huge, gigantic
much work,
thing with
yeah.
orchards and. It's
Wow.
getting bigger and bigger every year, it
Wow.
seems like. But that is like, I'm not even joking. They probably work in it like for 5 to 6 hours a day. Well, maybe not that long, but a few hours every single day just to make sure everything is there. Weeding has been done,
Wow.
watering certain things,
Yeah.
cultivating things, wrapping in blankets if it gets
Yeah.
too cold,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Like, it's a lot of work.
It's a
to
lot of
do
work.
a garden, and you can walk in and enjoy that garden.
Mm-hmm.
My parents have a beautiful garden, and
right.
Andy and I are looking forward to enjoying it in the summer.
right.
And I love sitting there and reading. It takes a lot of work to get it there,
sure.
and friendship is like that too. Like, it's a beautiful thing, but it doesn't come out of nowhere, and it
That's
takes
right.
cultivation.
I am curious about what your response is here. Now, there's some context that we're losing
Sure,
from just
the
taking this out
story,
of context,
yeah.
but friendship's something you don't really lose. How do you feel about that phrase?
Yeah, I feel like you lose friendships. We talked about it, didn't we?
We did talk about
Friendships you
that.
lose, yeah.
I think you'd have to know the show a little bit here. I think really what he is honing in on this, or at least how I interpret this line, is that the friendship never goes away, but the friends do.
Mm.
But I don't think the friendship itself ever ends. So it's kind of a play on words that he's using here. With
Friendship for friendship as a topic, an idea, or friendship as in that friendship with the person.
I
that
think
you've
friendship with
had.
that person
I see what you
never
mean.
necessarily
Sure.
goes away,
Sure.
unless there's a really huge fight or something that happens, I
Sure.
suppose. But I think that friendship, even as you
I don't
drift away,
know.
that still stays there. But the friend might go away.
Yeah,
But that's something different.
Yeah, I guess I think friendships end,
Yes, no, for sure.
right? Does that you don't lose what you enjoyed? I love
Yeah.
I've talked about the ending of La La Land before.
Yeah.
Like those they have value, and you are changed because of them. But
Yeah.
I do think that
I mean, there's another lyric that Sondheim uses in his show called Into the Woods, which kind of piggybacks on this, which is a different outlook on life from that character. Because all of his lyrics are really tuned to the character that's singing it. It might not necessarily be his point of view. but they talk about how a child is the only thing that goes from something you love to something you lose. Which is somewhat heartbreaking, but is also kind of true. That you love this special thing, and at a certain point, you have to let them go off on their own and kind of step back.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to think about it. But I guess that's where it comes down to. As a Christian, I believe that it just as much as those loss of friendships is painful and not right, just like death is not right.
Yeah,
there is this sense of there's a hope to it, and there's a comfort that says like, well, ultimately, the friendships that are in Christ will continue and grow deeper and richer and even better.
That's right.
And yeah, this has been a really fun conversation. This 2-part on friendship,
Yes,
singleness, and community. I think it's been one of the better ones that I can on this season so far. What do we have planned next for this? We're done
This is
the episodes,
We're
but
doing
we still
this
have
in the
some more
past.
stuff.
You're listening. Yeah. We're recording this in the past. You're listening to it in the present.
That's right.
And we're trying to figure out how this is going to work in the future.
Yeah.
So
coming up next, you've heard from a lot of voices
that's right.
that at the beginning of our episodes, and we've released 2 of those interviews to buy us some time. The one with Wesley.
2 or possibly 3, depending on how this works out.
2 or 3
this week.
episodes to buy some time. We're going to hear the rest of those as bonus episodes, and we're looking forward to sharing those. There'll be stuff that we'll disagree with, the stuff that we will agree with, lots of fodder for our final wrap-up conversation. And the reason we do a wrap-up conversation is because we're finite humans that are talking, even though we put a lot of prep and preparation into this, there's stuff that comes across wrong, stuff that isn't quite share everything. And so what's great is that as we release these episodes, Kyle, you and I listen to them, and we take notes, and our wrap-up episode is a chance to kind of go through the topics again and bring out things that struck us on the second listen, stuff we've learned since then, stuff we've connected to other episodes.
Yeah.
It's a fun conversation.
I actually listen to you when I re-listen to the episodes, so it's always something new that I learn from it.
But those wrap-up episodes are great. But the other thing we want to do is we want to get your feedback, and we want to get stories from you. And I've had a few friends that listen to the show reach out to me personally saying, "I want to
shame
comment."
them right now to send us in stuff."
Yes, I'm talking to you, Jim and Joe and Jimmy. Those are made up names.
But yeah, absolutely. We want to hear your feedback. And you can do that by either sending an email, or you can send in a video clip, or you can send in an audio clip, all to the same place, assumptionspod@gmail.com.
If you're sitting on it and you haven't thought about doing it, now's your time so that we can get those in by the time the interviews are done and we can record our wrap-up episode.
Assumptionspod is everywhere else in our social media. Daniel, what's your website that people can get in contact with you?
DanielMelvilleJones.com. And again, we will have show notes to link to some of the articles and discussion points that we talked about so far.
Sure. My Twitter, which is probably the best way to get in contact with me, is @TheKyleMarshall. That's Marshall with 2 L's. And we'll continue this conversation here in a few weeks. We'll hear these great interviews here in the interim.
Yeah.
And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Assumptions is produced by Kyle Marshall and Daniel Melville Jones. This episode edited by Kyle Marshall. Our thumbnail was created by the always great Chris Taniguchi. The music in this episode is from the band The Parson Redheads. You can check out their music anywhere digital music is available. If you want a full rundown of the articles and media that we reference, check out the show notes that Daniel puts together and that are attached to this episode. It's always a superb document that he puts together. Thanks for listening to The Credits. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks.